Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning into another edition of Crisis Corner. I have titled this one Crossing Species and Chimeras simply because, well, we always look at the idea of what transhumanism means and how that's a very real thing that we're dealing with all the time. The idea that they're changing genetics, synthetic biology, cloning, and all kinds of other things like that. But what happens whenever we start looking at genetically modified mosquitoes, growler bears, all kinds of other things on the other part of the spectrum? Pig, goat, chimeras, you see, things like that. We're going to be talking about basically transhumanism for animals. And with that being said, let's jump right into it. So what is transhumanism? And I know that's a very broad question, but to answer it quite simply, it's the idea that with technology and science, we will achieve a godlike status. We will achieve the next step in evolution, which is guided evolution, eugenics, self-evolution, things like that. We're going to be going through this process using techniques like mitochondrial replacement, synthetic biology, and CRISPR-Cas9, being able to edit the human genome. This is what transhumanism is in a nutshell. So you know how they're always saying that, oh, well, we tested this in monkeys, we tested it on mice, we tested it on rats, we tested it on elephants, we tested it on et cetera, insert animal here, right? Well, what happens to those animals? What happens to those types of animals that go off and create other types of species? You see, those are epigenetic factors that we're not looking at, and I will get into later on in the video. But before I do, I wanted to talk about the idea of what is happening to us as man. As I said before, getting out the idea of what is transhumanism. So before you, I have this article from Skywatch TV where it is titled The Next Frontier in Reproductive Tourism, Human Genetic Modification. And what is reproductive tourism? And it gives you a little bit of a description below. But basically what it is say you want a specific medical treatment done. You can't have it done in America. Say you go to someplace like Guatemala, South America, or in this case, the UK. The birth of the first baby born using a technique called mitochondrial replacement, which uses DNA from 3 people to correct an inherited genetic mutation, was announced on September 27th. And what they're referring to is the idea that 3-parent babies definitely do exist. More of these types of things will occur. They're called designer babies. But back into the article. Mitochondrial replacement, or donation, allows women who carry mitochondrial diseases to avoid passing them on to their child. These diseases can range from mild to life-threatening. No therapies exist and only a few drugs are available to treat them. There are no international rules regulating this technique. Just one country, the United Kingdom, explicitly regulates the procedure. It's a similar situation with other assisted reproductive technologies, or techniques. Some countries permit these techniques and others don't. I studied the intended and unintended consequences of regulating, prohibiting, or authorizing the use of new technologies. One of these unintended consequences is medical tourism, where people travel from their home countries to places where practices such as commercial surrogacy or embryo selection are allowed. So basically what we're talking about is the idea that people are going to different countries to do different types of medical experiments, medical procedures. What this makes me think whenever I hear commercial surrogacy and embryo selection is ectogenesis, the idea of designer babies, that you could go someplace and you can have certain characteristics, certain traits imbued into your child, into the next generation that's coming. I'm not sure if this is called IVF, in vitro fertilization, but we will be getting into things like that as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that the idea of literally trying to modify man is nothing new. But where do they get these kinds of concepts, and what exactly are they trying to modify man with and into? And that's a whole conversation in itself. And that's why with this slide, I wanted to put up a lot of different examples as to what it truly means to have human-animal chimeras and what crossing species definitely means. For example, the idea that they could have genetically modified mosquitoes running around in Florida, as provided by Bill Gates due to the Zika virus fiasco. Now, if you're a child of the internet like myself, you've heard of human-animal chimeras gestating underneath all across America your entire life. And then you're asking yourself, well, where are they? What are we talking about? What human-animal chimeras and what are we looking at? Well, obviously, if this kind of creature came out and started literally breaking the animal kingdom, our ecosystem, a lot of different things would start happening. They can't release these creatures out into the wild and expect for everything to be okay. Obviously, they're still going to be, in the lab. You see in right here another example, growing hybrid human chimp brains to understand intellectual differences and diseases. Now that right there is the linchpin as to why they say they're doing a lot of the things that they are doing. They say they want to create cures. They say they want to cure diseases. They say they want to understand human. But one of the things I don't think that we're talking about is what happens whenever you introduce this new predator into the animal kingdom. What happens whenever you start introducing hybrid growler bears into the population, or the idea of creating transplantable human organs in pigs and how it could create monsters. This is the aspect that I think people need to start looking at. While it might be fantastical to see these types of things going on and to see or even postulate the idea that we could have cross species going, we've all got to start thinking. A lot of what we're used to, even the meat that we eat down to the milk that you drink, these are all things that have been with us since before your time, since before your grandfather's time. And these creatures, they didn't go extinct then. So what happens whenever we're literally creating a brand new species? You see. And it gets way, way more in depth than just that. There's no way I can just say, hey, look at this. We're creating a brand new species. It's called a human-animal hybrid. It's called a chimera. And that's how it's going to work. There are so many more ecological questions that come into it whenever you start thinking about what happens with all this. I mean, the fact that you have genetically modified mosquitoes running around in Florida, if anything, fighting the disease that the Aedes aegypti, I'm not sure, the Zika-carrying mosquito that was in Florida, fighting that, and then creating all kinds of genetic mutations in the people that are already in there, and then how all that just happens to mess with your biology. You see what I'm saying? There's all kinds of different things that we have to start looking at when we talk about crossing species. I mean, heck yeah, all of this stuff definitely sounds interesting. A griffin, a chimera, a manticore, all of these things are in our history. But is that what is happening today? Are we repeating history? Have we not learned our mistake? Is there a reason as to why the animals that we have today have survived versus the animals, the super predators and everything else that have fallen away on the wayside, or that have been extinct due to our oppression upon the planet?
Sometimes called chimeras, but there's actually a broader group of this. And again, the method is to think about a large number of cases. It's helpful to think about very different cases. So to use some real cases, imagine you mixed human brain cells, so human brain stem cells in the embryonic stage, into a mouse to create a mouse with a humanized brain. Now, it wouldn't be a human brain. It does exactly the same. It's much smaller, for example, but has humanized elements. Another example is, imagine you took a gorilla, treated the gorilla exactly as it is, but were able to generate a human-looking face, right? So a gorilla with a human face. How would we think about that entity? Third example, humanized immune system. Took a mouse, and we do this, we have these at Harvard, for example, and created an immune system in order to test drugs. Think about HIV, for example, that was humanized. So not the brain, but just the immune system was very human-like.
That's a little crazy, huh? Well, imagine what's going on that we're not talking about. Check this out. In her own small corner of this research utopia at the Human Brain Laboratory at the University of Cambridge, Madeline Lancaster's team is at work on a task so absurd that it seems more wizardly than scientific. They're transforming human skin into brains. Lancaster is using the brains to answer the decades-old mystery. For all of our intellectual superiority, the genetic difference between humans and chimpanzees is around 1.2%. That's only 12 times higher than the difference between individual humans, which is about 10%. Why? To find out, the team has been taking individual genes involved in brain development and replacing them with chimpanzee versions, then using these cells to make hybrid chimp-human brains. Let me say that one more time. To find out how these differences occur, the team has been taking individual genes involved in brain development and replacing them with the chimpanzee version, then using these cells to make hybrid chimp-human brains. I think that's a noble venture. The idea that they could try to conduct this type of research, trying to find the cure for autism and schizophrenia, looking for the types of differences in that way. But I think it's also admirable that they would say that they're only doing it for the brains. There's no way that they're actually doing this with genetics, or to see if, they could merge the DNA of, a human and a chimpanzee. I think it was Stalin who said that he wanted to create Humanzees, and this is where the super soldier program comes from. Hitler wasn't the only one that had this idea. You see, all kinds of other people have had the idea of literally mixing to create the Ubermensch, to create the Superman, to have the super soldier program, and more of this type of stuff is going on. So although I find these things clearly fantastic and clearly interesting, we have to understand what the actual purpose of them are and where the origins of this type of research comes from and what their overarching goal is. As I said before at the start of the video, it is guided evolution, self-guided evolution, eugenics, and this is what they're trying to do. They're creating these human animal chimeras, yes, and they're telling us that they're only doing it to fight diseases, but I don't think so. What happened whenever Christopher Columbus came here to America? What happens, and this is what Stephen Hawking talks about as well, what happens when any technologically superior race goes across anything else? I mean, what happens with alien versus predator, or predator versus prey? Anything that has the obvious advantage will clearly dominate, and these are the types of things that we need to start looking at, not only whenever we start introducing these things into society and into our ethosphere, what we deal with on the regular, you see the status quo, but we also have to understand what this is going to do epigenetically after the fact. How will this mutate? Will it mutate? Will it be stable? Is this something that can continue to go on? You see, and these are all the types of questions that we need to ask, not only for ourselves in regards to transhumanism, but to the mammals, to the other creatures that are on this planet. We get so caught up in what's going on in our lives, we don't take the time to see that we're literally cloning and growing cows only for them to be slaughtered and then sold back to us as grade D meat as provided by McDonald's. And if that's not strange enough, how do you guys feel about the idea of literally trying to resurrect creatures? Or the idea that they can reverse extinction by basically placing the DNA and the genes of a woolly mammoth in the embryo of an elephant? The idea is to hopefully, in theory, literally be able to grow or bring back a woolly mammoth because of the genetic similarities that the two share. The end of species extinction is in sight, according to scientists. In 2017, scientists plan to bring back the long-gone beasts of old. While the researchers claim they are set to bring back animals, the question is, will they also be bringing back the Nephilim? And this is why I had to lead in talking about chimeras, crossing species, and all these other things before. The idea that, are we repeating history? Have we learned from any of our mistakes? Genetic and stem cell technologies are on the cusp of letting us clone even infertile, endangered animals when intact DNA is available. And some extinct species could be brought back by tweaking the genome of a living close relative. It should also be possible to engineer lost traits into a population. One initiative involves the northern white rhino, which is now down to 3 infertile individuals living in Kenya. This year, a plan was announced to use stem cell technologies, frozen specimens, and assisted reproduction to make new rhinos. Similarly, genetic rescue could help the black-footed ferret, one of the most endangered mammals in North America, to make a comeback. The first in vitro experiments are set to begin in 2017 and will tackle inbreeding and disease resistance because of a type of plague and unrelatable virus are in danger of wiping out the animals. Another project is using gene editing to make a chimeric rooster of prairie chickens to help bring back their extinct relative, the healthy hen. If it works, they hope to revive the passenger pigeon next. And as I said before, with the start of this, the idea that they're trying to put woolly mammoth genes inside of a elephant only to basically grow it back. So what is this? What happens whenever this type of mentality is being taken towards life, towards extinction, towards everything? You see, as they said before, they're creating a chimeric rooster to bring back a hen. Is this a chicken and the egg type situation? Pun intended? Are we reprogramming resurrection? Is that a paradox? Can these things occur? As I said before, with the correlation, are they trying to create chimeras? What happens when these things are introduced into our biosphere, into our environment? Will this be healthy? How would you feel? Well, I know this might sound strange, but how would you feel if you had a goat that was part spider and you had to eat it because this Greek place was selling it? Or a lamb that was mixed with, I don't know, some genes of a fish somehow. I don't know. You see, and this is the strange part, is because now that we literally have things like CRISPR-Cas9, genome editing, mitochondrial replacement donation, 3-parent baby, synthetic biology, IVF, ectogenesis, as they said before, commercial surrogacy, and embryo selection, all these different types of things. When we're looking at what is going on with life itself, not only for humans, but for mammals and animals, we really have to understand what the overall goal is. And the overall goal in the transhumanist mindset is that through science and technology, that we will achieve godlike status, and that we'll do anything that it takes to get ourselves there, because, well, we have the tools, we have the capabilities, and why not? Be damned whoever gets in our way. It doesn't matter who gets in our way. It doesn't matter who we destroy. It doesn't matter who we hurt. It doesn't matter who we corrupt. And that is the mindset that's being taken when we look at this type of information, this type of reality. You see the idea that we're living in a synthetic society, that they're creating synthetic blood, that the synthetic agenda is the distorted heart of the New World Order. That radioactive food and water is the new normal in Japan, while a panel endorses gene drives that could alter the entire species. But at the same time, scientists are making real animals from artificial eggs. And while all this is taking place, they're finding a new, mysterious human chromosome, a new structure found in the human chromosome. And all these types of things are going on, guys. So if this is what's happening here in the realm of, well, us, individuals, humans, the very same people that they say they're trying to help. Well, what happens to the animals? What happens to the people that they're not trying to help? What happens to the people on the wayside? And that's all I wanted to take a look at in this episode. I wanted to look at the idea of, well, while we're making human-animal chimeras, well, what are animal-human chimeras? What are Humanzees? And though I didn't get to them, and I probably will in another edition, where we talk about things like the Montauk Monster, and we go into more depth about Joseph Stalin and Humanzees. I think I have that right. I hope I have that right. We will start to get to the bottom of all this other stuff. But that's all I got for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. And as always, guys, stay vigilant, expose lies, and share truth. This is Noisera, Freedom Faction, out.